Engels begins The Origin of the Family, Private Property and the State by inviting us to rethink some of our deepest assumptions about society. Are inequality, hierarchy, and the nuclear family just natural parts of human existence? His answer is no. Instead, Engels takes us back to a time where human societies were simpler, cooperative, and fundamentally different from what we see today. Drawing on anthropological research, particularly Lewis Henry Morgan's study of the Iroquois people of North America, Engels describes early communities organized around kinship and collective living. These societies practiced what he calls primitive communism, where resources were shared and no one owned property individually. There was no accumulation of wealth, there was no strict inheritance rules, and no rigid family structures like monogamy. This way of life challenges the idea that inequality, competition, and patriarchal families are inevitable. Instead, Engels argues that the world we live in today, with its sharp inequalities and powerful institutions, is not the product of human nature, but of historical development. By understanding the roots of these systems, we can better question their necessity. In today's video, we'll examine 3 major changes that reshaped human life forever through Engels' book. First, we'll explore how farming led to the emergence of private property and class divisions. Next, we'll look at how the family became an economic tool for controlling wealth and women. Finally, we'll uncover how the state arose as a way to enforce class domination. These shifts lay the foundation for the inequalities that we face today, and by understanding them, we can start to imagine alternatives. The turning point in history, Engels argues, comes with the advent of agriculture. For tens of thousands of years, humanity survived as hunter-gatherers, living off what nature provided. In these societies, food was shared because no one person could hoard it for long because it would spoil. But farming changed everything. People began to cultivate land, domesticate animals, and produce more food than they immediately needed. For the first time in history, there was a surplus. This surplus created 2 key problems. 1, who controlled it, and 2, how it was distributed. Instead of being shared collectively, as in earlier societies, the surplus became the property of individuals or families. Land, tools, and livestock became markers of wealth, and with this shift, private property was born. This is where Engels sees the root of inequality. Those who owned the surplus, so the land, the resources, gained power over those who didn't. For the first time in human history, societies were divided into a class. A small group of owners and a much larger group of workers who labored to produce more wealth but didn't share in it equally. This transformation wasn't just about economics. It changed how people related to one another. Communal living gave way to competition. Wealth began to accumulate in fewer and fewer hands, creating systems of exploitation that persist to this day. Engels helps us to understand that the inequalities of modern capitalism have deep roots in this moment, where private property and class first emerged as dominant forces. The rise of private property didn't just change the economy, it also reshaped the family. In earlier communal societies, family structures were fluid, with inheritance and power often passed down through maternal lines. But as wealth and private property became more important, so did the question of who would inherit it. This is where Engels sees the family turning into an institution designed to serve economic needs. To ensure that property stayed within the same bloodline, societies moved towards patriarchal family structures. Men became the head of households, with women and children dependent on them. This shift was about more than just inheritance. It also reinforced men's control of wealth and labor within the family. Women who had played significant roles in communal societies saw their power diminished as they were relegated to domestic roles. Engels calls this the open quote, historic defeat of the female sex, end quote. He argues that this shift wasn't a natural evolution, but a direct result of economic changes. By tying the family to property and inheritance, society created a system where women's subordination was institutionalized. This connection between family, property, and inequality remains a cornerstone of Engels' critique. He shows us that understanding the family as an economic unit reveals how deeply gender oppression is tied to systems of wealth and power. As private property and class divisions solidified, society needed a way to maintain these new hierarchies. Enter the state. Engels argued that the state didn't arise as a neutral institution to protect everyone equally. Instead, it was created to protect the interests of the ruling class, the owners of property. The state provided the tools necessary to enforce this class rule. Armies defended the property of the wealthy against both external threats and internal revolts. Laws were written to protect private property and punish those who challenged it. Ideologies were spread to justify inequality, convincing people that the existing system was natural or even divinely ordained. Engels' analysis challenges the idea that the state is a protector of the common good. From its very origins, the state has been a tool of exploitation, ensuring that the wealth and power of the ruling class remains secure. By examining the role of the state in early societies, Engels helps us understand its continued role in maintaining inequalities today. He invites us to question whether the state, as we know it, can ever serve the interests of all people, rather than a privileged few. Engels situates these changes within a broader Marxist framework, explaining how the economic base, which is the way we produce and distribute goods, shapes everything else in society. Institutions like the family and the state are part of the superstructure, which is built to support the economic base and reinforce class relations. The family, for example, ensures that the wealth and property are passed down within the ruling class. The state, meanwhile, uses laws, police, and ideologies to protect the system of private property. Engels shows us that these institutions are not neutral nor timeless. They exist to stabilize and reproduce the system of exploitation that began with the rise of private property. But Engels doesn't stop at critique. He offers a vision for a better future, a classless society where these oppressive institutions no longer exist. Without private property, there would be no need for the family as an economic unit. Gender roles could equalize and communal living could return in new forms. Similarly, the state, which exists to enforce class rule, would wither away as class divisions disappear over time. In its place, society could organize around collective ownership and democratic control of resources. Engels' work reminds us that these systems are not permanent. They were created by humans and can be dismantled by humans. By understanding their origins, we can imagine a world beyond them. In conclusion, Engels' The Origin of the Family, Private Property, and the State offers us both a critique of the past and a vision of the future. By understanding how these systems arose, we can imagine a better world, where they're replaced with egalitarian and democratic alternatives. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Left Library for more simplified political theory.